Welcome to the Revolution Church. We're eager to connect with you. Please visit our website at www.trcgary.com. On our main page, there is a form you can fill out so that you can reach us directly, or you can email us at trcgary@gmail.com. Please also feel free to call or text. Our number is 219-628-5974. We look forward to hearing from you. Let's continue to worship through our tithes and offerings. Please visit www.trcgary.com. Once there, simply click on Online Giving, and this online giving page will come up. Scroll down to the Revolution, enter the dollar amount that you would like to give, and then click Continue. It will walk you through the process of filling out the form so that you are able to give your tithes and offerings online. Thank you.
Good morning. Welcome once again to our Sunday service, and I want to take a moment to invite you to participate with us this morning. Please take your Bible and open Acts chapter 9. As Acts chapter 9. There's a classic hymn that says this: "Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I am found, was blind, but now I see." Amazing grace. Today, as we enter into God's Word, I want you to be thinking about that familiar hymn, and familiar to many people. As you know, we continue on in our Sunday message series called Represent as we journey through the book of Acts. And today is week number 10, and we're in chapter 9 of Acts. In the very beginning, in chapter 1, verse 8, Jesus says this to his disciples: "And you will receive power when the Holy Spirit comes on you, and you will be my representatives, my witnesses, everywhere, in Jerusalem, in Judea and Samaria, and to the ends of the earth." This was a charge, this was a promise, this was a commission, if you will, to Jesus's disciples in Acts chapter 1. And by extension, all of us who call on the name of Christ, who are followers of Jesus have the same. Today we get into Acts chapter 9, and for our time this morning I'm going to be reading out of the Message translation, but you feel free to engage whatever translation that you normally use to engage God's Word. Acts chapter 9, starting in verse 1. All this time Saul was breathing down the necks of the Master's disciples, out for the kill. He went to the chief priests and got arrest warrants to take to the meeting places in Damascus, so that if he found anyone there who belonged to the way, aka Jesus, whether men or women, he could arrest them and bring them to Jerusalem. Now picture this, put it within context. We know that in Acts chapter, I believe it was 7, we get the account of Stephen. End of chapter 6 into chapter 7, we see what goes on with Stephen, who was, remember, he's a food pantry cat that God used to do miraculous things to bring attention to Jesus and to share the message of the good news of Jesus Christ. There was twisting of his words. People lied on him. They got the crowd all riled up on him, and they went in on Stephen, dragged him outside the city, took up rocks and murdered him. And at the end of chapter, I'm trying to remember, at the end of chapter 7, if not the very beginning of chapter 8, it says, now Saul was standing there in approval, holding the coats of those who were involved in what was going on. There are sometimes in our settings where we may not be directly involved with something, like we're not doing the actions, but we are in support of the actions. We are complicit with the actions. This was Saul. In fact, some writers will say that it's more than just a casual support here, that Paul was in a position kind of like a mob boss. In the mafia organization, the mob boss isn't the person out there going, a lot of times, pulling the trigger, doing the hits. They have hitmen to do that for them, but they're in such a position of power and authority, of influence, that they don't get their hands dirty, so to speak. They have other people doing the work. They're sitting back holding the coats of those who are there. This is Saul. And he is out there doing this persecution, hunting down Christians so that he could arrest them and so forth. Verse 3, he set off, and when he got to the outskirts of Damascus, he was suddenly dazed by a blinding flash of light. As he fell to the ground, he heard a voice, Saul, Saul, why are you out to get me? He said, who are you, Master? I am Jesus, the one you are hunting down. I want you to get up and enter to the city. In the city you will be told what to do next. Verse 7. His companions stood there dumbstruck. They could hear the sound but couldn't see anyone, while Saul, picking himself up from the ground, found himself stone blind. They had to take him by the hand and lead him into Damascus. He continued blind for 3 days. He ate nothing, drank nothing. There was a disciple in Damascus by the name of Ananias. The master spoke to him in a vision. Ananias. Yes, master, he answered. Get up and go over the straight avenue. Ask at the house of Judas for a man from Tarsus. His name is Saul. He is there praying. He has just had a dream in which he saw a man named Ananias enter the house and lay hands on him so he could see again. Ananias protested, Master, you can't be serious. Everybody's talking about this man by the name of Saul. Everybody's talking about this man and the terrible things he's been doing, his reign of terror against your people in Jerusalem. And now he's shown up here with papers from the chief priests that give him license to do the same to us. Please, feel the weight, feel the pressure, feel the cost of what it would mean for Ananias to do what God is asking him to do. Everybody knows what Saul is on. Everybody knows Saul is no good. Everybody knows about Saul's rep. And he's been given sanction by the state to enact what it is that he's going about. How would you feel? How would you feel if God was like, yo, I want you to go talk to this person that's got a rep that has hurt you and your people? And you know, and everyone else knows, that engaging this person is a high probability that you could lose your life. If not losing your life, you would have state-sanctioned terrorism, incarceration, persecution. This is the weight of what's here in this passage. It's important that we get that. Verse 15. But the master said, don't argue, go. I picked him as my personal representative to non-Jews and kings and Jews. And now I'm about to show him what he's in for, the hard suffering that goes with this job. So Ananias went, found the house, placed his hands on blind Saul and said, Brother Saul, the master has sent me. The name of Jesus, the same Jesus you saw on your way here, he sent me so you could see again and be filled with the Holy Spirit. No sooner were the words out of his mouth than something like scales fell from Saul's eyes. He could see again. He got to his feet, was baptized, and sat down with them to a hearty meal. My God. What an amazing account. Can you feel it? Can you feel the drama? Can you feel the angst? Could you feel the cost of what it would mean for Ananias to be obedient to what Christ is asking him to do, to go talk to Saul? Can you feel the anxiety as Ananias is going looking for Paul, as he's going to the house? Could you feel the nervousness under Ananias's words as he's asking, is Saul here? Could you feel the anxiety that may be rising within Ananias as he begins to utter a prayer and to lay hands on someone that he knows has killed people, has supported the killing of people, the false imprisonment of people? In a devotional that I'm doing, The Bible in 1 Year by Nicky Gumbel, he writes this: John Newton, who lived between 1725 and 1801, was a militant atheist, a bully and a blasphemer. He was a wild and angry young man. He was press-ganged into the Navy at the age of 18, where he broke the rules so recklessly that he was publicly flogged for desertion. He was hated and feared by his crewmates, and himself became a slave trader. At the age of 23, Newton's ship encountered a severe storm off the coast of Donegal and almost sank. He called out to God as a ship filled with water, and on that day, March the 10th, 1748, God rescued him. He began a new life. He started to pray and read the Bible. Eventually, he joined William Wilberforce in the campaign to abolish the slave trade and became a leading light in that campaign. Newton's best known as the author of the hymn, Amazing Grace. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found, was blind, but now I see. The time period was the late 80s. And there was a young man who grew up in the suburbs and then currently, or at that time, was living in the country. He spent time on a farm, and he went to high school of that community that was largely white. In fact, there was one or two African Americans in the entire school system, and maybe a couple of Asian or Indian descent. During this time period, this young man was very much into basketball, and the atmosphere, the culture was where the high school team would play, the whole community would come out. At the same time, in the neighboring town, a popular basketball player by the name of Shawn Kemp. Some of you may know or have heard of Shawn Kemp if you follow NBA. He went on to have an amazing NBA career for the Seattle Supersonics. He entered a dunk contest, and amazing athlete, amazing gifted basketball player. He played at this high school. And this young man went to the opposing high school, and they had a game one Friday evening. This young man who was zealous for the game of basketball and for his local high school team was looking for ways to support his local high school basketball team against this behemoth team from the opposing town that had Shawn Kemp on it, and it was the place to be. So he showed up at the game early and sat on the bleacher on the floor at center court, the best place on which to watch a basketball game. And his friends came into the game carrying a paper bag. Inside the paper bag were a bunch of bananas. Some of you may understand where the story is going, but this young man, along with his friends, when it came time for Shawn Kemp, who was African American, for his name to be read across the PA system, they took out, and this young man joined in and grabbed the bananas and started waving them in the air, jeering at Shawn Kemp and the opposing team. This young man didn't think anything wrong about it. In fact, he thought it was the thing to do. He thought it was part of supporting his local team. He did not go to bed wrestling about his actions. No one confronted him about his actions. It was what it was. In fact, he grew up in a home in a family that was full of Christian people. In fact, his grandfather was a pastor. His mother and father were involved in church ministry, leading in youth group and serving in different ways within the church. And he was active in his youth group. He was a leader in his youth group. He was a Christian teenager. His family, when holidays would come around, would have a bowl of mixed nuts on the table that were raw, still in their shells. And there was one nut in particular which he later found out was named a Brazil nut, but all throughout his growing up period it was called nigger toes. This young man, as he waved the bananas or said pass the nigger toes, or would say I don't want to have nigger toes to eat, didn't think anything about it. No one had a discussion about how vile those acts were, how racist those acts were. The intention of the young man was not to be racist, and yet he was. That young man in the late 80s was me. I, ashamedly, participated in racist acts of demeaning people, of looking at them as others. The fact of my intention was not the most important thing. What was particularly a shame was that in all of my growing up time, in the churches in which I ran, in the sermons that were preached, nothing was addressing those issues. Now, I may be foggy in my memory, and maybe there were some messages of which were preached that way, but let me just tell you, my faults might have been addressed through God's word, through youth group, or through the pulpit, or through my parents, but my defaults were firmly in place. And I was defaulting to persecuting or being racist towards or being denigrating towards or being prejudiced towards people who didn't look like me. In fact, if Shawn Kemp would have happened to be Asian, out of my mouth flippantly would have come out Kung Flu or some variation of that. The beautiful thing is that Jesus not only dies for our faults, but also our defaults. Jesus not only heals and works on, exposes our faults, but also our defaults. So why do I share these stories? Why do I share stories of John Newton and Ryan Fleming and Saul of Tarsus? Here's the thing. Paul was on his journey to do what he did. And God had to grab his attention. Paul was on a journey and he was going the direction that he needed to go, and God had to knock him on his behind. He had to grab his attention. He had to experience significant discomfort for God to be speaking to his hard head, his hard heart, his stiff neck. John Newton, likewise, had to have some significant discomfort for him to wake up. Ryan Fleming had to experience some discomfort and some shake-up of his environment to begin to see things differently and for God to do a work in my heart, even as a believer. What does it mean for you? Are you on a journey of your comfort, on the way that you've always seen things, on your rights, on your abilities, on your status quo, on your life of sin, on the way that you view people, on the way that you view your constitutional rights, as you view your patriotism? Are you on a journey within your life that is contrary to the journey that God would have you to be on? And could God be orchestrating things in your life that are extremely uncomfortable to knock you on to grab your attention? Oh, brothers and sisters, please don't quickly dismiss discomfort in your life. Brothers and sisters, please don't quickly dismiss those challenging experiences where things just don't go well, because it could quite possibly be the loving hand of God that allows you to experience significant pain to alter your course, to get your attention, to lovingly put you on the path He has. It was some years later, actually quite a few years later, after I graduated college, after I did a 1.5 year internship here in Gary, Indiana with the Tree of Life Missionary Baptist Church, after serving several years in another church as a youth pastor and associate pastor, that God was tugging my heart to go and plant a church which would become the Revolution Church. The first Sunday that we were going to hold services, the norm for that time was to go out and canvass a neighborhood with promo materials, and we were about being a church that was non-traditional but still bringing the meat of what God's word is about, right? We just doing things a little bit different stylistically, but still wanting to reach out to people with scripture. I had this idea that we should do door hanger flyers and have a catchy picture that would grab people's attention and cause them to think about coming to the church. Oh, it was catchy, all right, but not in the right way. See, Ryan Fleming was on the journey. Still am. The picture which I chose to put on there was this picture of a monkey with a surprise face. And the caption read this: "Are you looking for something different? In no way was my intention to be racist or to be stereotypical or harken back to Jim Crow or any of the blackface imagery associating monkeys and animals with black people. That was furthest from my intention. However, the impact was there. Why are you sharing this story, Ryan? How does this connect with what we are studying here in Acts? Hang on a second. As I'm out in the community hanging these door hangers up on homes, a man stopped me who happened to be a pastor, African American man, and he said, "Son, we need to have a talk." And he was pretty stern with it. So we exchanged information, and I set up a time to meet with him, and he sternly, very directly, and yet graciously shared with me why what I had put on this flyer and the purpose, the history behind it, as well as the impact behind it. I'm forever grateful for this pastor who put himself out there, so to speak, to have that conversation with someone he doesn't know, to help them on the journey. How does this connect? This pastor who had a conversation with young Pastor Ryan, he was acting as Ananias did in Acts chapter 9. So what's our application? Not only do we need to repent and turn to God, but are you actively seeking ways to undo your blind spots? Are you actively seeking healing? You see, there's something beautiful about Christ's body. And we are set within the body of Christ and then the local expression of the church to interact with each other and help each other and to have mutuality. Yes, we have a personal relationship with Christ, but not just a personal relationship with Christ. We have a communal relationship with Christ. And here we see it played out in Acts chapter 9, where God began to do a work in Saul, who would become Paul, who was used by God in amazing ways, right? And he was in a noble position as a Roman citizen and trained with the highest level of education as a lawyer, and he was privileged beyond privilege, and God knocked him off of all of that to get into his mind and into his heart. But he also used Ananias in a very uncomfortable, in a very costly experience, to be the vessel of which God would do further healing. The question is, for you and for me, is will we seek the healing from God, even if it's from other people who are showing us that we are blind? I'm concerned in these days. I'm drastically concerned in these days that we are traumatized more than what we know. That in our current time, where we have social distancing and the pandemic and the struggles that come as a result of that with our kids in school, with our finances, with potential health issues, with the emotional weight of that. Thrown into that is what happened with George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud Arbery, all on top of a historical context of this taking place, and then the milieu of what is social media and back and forth and this and that, and it is a lot of stuff. My concern is that we take that trauma and we isolate, that we dig in, that we find ourselves in a hole somewhere that is deep, dark, and lonely. And God is calling us to seek healing for our blind spots. And he may use an Ananias in your life. In fact, God may use someone who is unlike Ananias totally. It could be a donkey, literally. Just holler at Balaam about that. So the question is, will you repent and turn to God, but also will you recognize that you are blind, that you have blind spots in your life, and that you need to seek healing? And lastly is this, and this is where it's hard. I'm going to mess in your Kool-Aid. Will you allow healing to flow through you to those who have been your enemy? Will you allow healing, the healing of God, to flow through you to those who have been your enemy? This challenges our allegiance. In a time, and by the time you watch this, it will be the 5th of July, after the 4th of July, which a lot of people in the United States talk about celebrating the freedom of the country, freedom from another country's rule and reign here. We'll be talking about pledging allegiance to the flag of the United States of America. And it's interesting what we pledge allegiance to. Paul could have remained in a stubborn, arrogant, hard-hearted position even when he was knocked on his and blinded. He could have blamed God. He could have been bitter and sour and said all manner of curse words against God. He could have blamed everyone else. He could have blamed his companions for not watching out for what was going on and not helping them out, and why this and that didn't happen. And he could have went on and on and on about blame of other things. But what did Paul do? He listened to the voice of God. He prayed. What did Ananias do? He had some issues with what God was asking him to do because he knew what it meant to go and speak with Saul. He knew that cost, but he counted the cost, and he sacrificed himself. He knew that going to see Saul could very well mean the end of his life, and yet he obeyed God. Are we ready for that? Are we that type of follower of Jesus? I mean, let's be real. Are our allegiances to God that strong that we'll do things that will cost us? Or do we want a costless Christianity, a cross minus the crucifixion? Like, that isn't Christianity at all. That isn't following Jesus. That isn't any of that. That's religious garbage. But if you want to follow Jesus, he promises that his Spirit will fill you and give you the power to be his representatives. Just like he empowered Ananias to represent God to the fullest in a dangerous situation with Saul. The question is, will you ante up? Will you be on deck? Will all hands be on deck? Will you be a part of the mission? Or will you sit on the sidelines and just want to be religious in your own little way, sitting on back in a religious whatever? I'm very concerned in this time that far too many people who have called on the name of Jesus are too comfortable sitting on the sidelines. And just like that horn, there was an alarm sounding off, are just ignoring the alarm. Are sitting back, just chilling. It's all right. Yeah. With that being said, I'm looking forward to next week. Next Sunday, July the 12th. We're going to be having a time of worship and prayer outside, rain or shine. And yes, it's maybe uncomfortable. I don't care. Like, I'm at a stage now in where I'm at with stuff that I don't care if it's uncomfortable. Like, your comfort is not my top priority. You becoming more like Jesus is. And we're going to gather together, 11 o'clock, and have a time of worship and prayer publicly, culminated with communion. And I invite you to come take part of that. Now, if you want to serve even more, you can hit us up and ask, like, how can I serve? Can I help set up some stuff? And can I help serve in different ways? There's opportunities for that. Afterwards, we're going to have another community barbecue. We'll crank up sound system. We'll be jamming in the neighborhood. If you've been around, you already know how it goes down. And we're going to serve the community. I invite you to take part in that. Could it possibly be? Could it possibly be that God set up this message today to get you to be knocked off of your, so that you can see the light, that you can have the scales removed from your eyes, so that you can help do the same for someone else? Could you be Saul, needing to be knocked off of your, or maybe you're Ananias. Maybe you know the Lord, but God is calling you to step out in some ways that cost you comfort, cost you time, cost you resources, cost you stepping outside of what is your normal operating system. What if God would use you just like he used Ananias? And you serving a plate of barbecue for somebody, you are there, and you might even have the opportunity to pray with somebody. What if at the end of that passage we read today, Paul and Ananias are sitting together having a hearty meal? Picture that within a short span of time. I am not so jaded and so tired, though I'm tired, though I'm exhausted, though there's times of great disappointment, though there's wounds and scars. I'm not so scarred or so apathetic to not see the hope that is in Christ, to not stand on the promises of God's word, and to not believe that the same message that Jesus spoke, that you will receive power when the Holy Spirit comes on you, and you will be my witnesses. I'm confident in that. My prayer is that you are obedient. Let's pray. Father, thank you for your word. Help me. Help us. May we be your representatives. May we throw aside every weight that hinders and everything that blocks us from doing what you want us to do. May we be able to proclaim amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see. Amen. God bless you. See you next Sunday. Peace.
continue to worship through our tithes and offerings, please visit www.trcgary.com. Once there, simply click on Online Giving, and this online giving page will come up. Scroll down to the Revolution, enter the dollar amount that you would like to give, and then click Continue. It will walk you through the process of filling out the form so that you are able to give your tithes and offerings online. Thank you. Welcome to the Revolution Church's website page. Let's take a look around. We're excited to be able to offer many different resources through our website. We have links to different apps, we have a blog, calendar of events, community resources, activities for the children, a link to online giving, and a link to sermons that may have been missed or that you might just want to listen to again. Let's take a look at each one. On our apps page, we have some links to the different apps that we use here at the church. The blog is different posts, writings, and videos that talk to some of the situations that we're going through today. Our calendar of events just let you know what's going on through the church. We have our Easter services and different church services on Sundays and devotions and connect groups. That information is here on our calendar of events. Our next page is our community resources page. On our community resources page, we link to some of the different resources that are available to our community. These things are important, more important now than ever before. So perhaps you need to find places to get meals for your children while they're out of school. If you just clicked on food right here, it would take you right to some resources that we have come across that would be very beneficial. The same goes for education, internet, and financial. Again, this provides links to resources that we have come across that would be of use to you and your family at this time. Our next page is our Just Shorties page. And on our Just Shorties page, we have a link to the Shorty Sunday School lessons that Miss Kathy Ligon has been implementing with the children. And we also have some links to some educational materials that you can do with your children as they are home from school for quite a long time, and we want to help prevent any boredom and things like that. So you can find some information for that here. Our next page is our online giving. You are able to click right on the online giving, and then you can fill out this form right here. We are the Revolution Church. Our tithes and offerings are given through our sister church, but we just fill it in right here to show that it is for the Revolution Church. So you can put in your dollar amount here and then click Continue. You could also decide on a frequency, once a month, one time, weekly, bi-weekly, monthly. You can set that up however you see fit and hit Continue, and it walks you through the process of being able to give online. Finally, we have our sermons. Sermons that have been preached, and they had originally been, many of them had originally been on Facebook Live. You can find the links to those sermons here. And our other sermons that are done and that are housed on YouTube, different places like that, you can find all of those right here. We are very excited to be partnering with you and serving you during this time. And we hope that you will be able to connect with us. Simply go to the home page, scroll down to the bottom, and you can contact the Revolution Church. We look forward to hearing from you. Have a wonderful day.